Okay, it's 12:30. I can see people are joining and I will continue to let people come in, but I just want to maybe get started with an introduction because I want to be respectful of everyone's time so you guys can get out of here. Thanks so much for coming. It is May Mental Health Awareness Month. And what a great opportunity to check in, see how we are doing, create awareness. And I'm really hoping that is something we can do today. So, I have a couple people raising their hand. Is that by accident? Is everything okay? Okay, just have perfect. Okay, I just want to make sure there weren't any technical issues, but it seems like we're okay. Okay. Well, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Catherine Van Tassell, and I'm the Director of Behavioral Health Consulting here at GBS. And we are so excited to have you guys for Mental Health Awareness Month. When I was thinking about putting together a seminar or this month-long information into mini webinars, I really wanted people to walk away with tools to help in everyday life. And that's really because what I've been hearing a lot from work and in my own personal life and in my clinic is that people are just feeling really stressed and overwhelmed. And unfortunately, I don't have the answers to make us all independently wealthy and have all of our needs met and be without stress. So I thought the next best thing would be to give you tools to be able to cope with stress and help not only your body physically, but mentally. So that's what we're going to do today. And we'll just kind of look at overall what this will look like. So, how does chronic stress impact both our brain and our body? And then thinking about takeaway concrete tools that you can have, we're going to review a couple of CBT based tools. So you should have received an email when you signed up with some worksheets that we're going to be reviewing today. So you can have those handy now or make sure you reference them after our presentation. And one of the skills that we're going to talk about is the cycle of avoidance. So, who here in this presentation has ever avoided something or procrastinated something because it made them anxious? And I would probably say most, if not all of us, have done that in one part of our life or another, or continue to use it as a maladaptive coping skill. So hopefully today you will have a new tool instead of avoidance, but we don't know what we don't know. So we're going to talk about why we may do that and how we can avoid it. So just think about what are your biggest stresses that you have right now? And I'm sure all of you could give me a whole list of them. If you don't have a list of them, I have provided one for you. But we're not faced with challenges in today's world. There's one thing I want to say about that. Stress isn't inherently bad for us. In fact, stress can be good for us. It's when we don't have the tools to be able to mediate stress that we see the bad psychological and physical outcomes. So I don't want us to have this vision of stress being bad. I want us to think of what are our tools. So again, we all have bills, many of us have families, health concerns, and then all of these different things that can come at us in our very busy world. How are we looking at that, facing it? Okay, so let's just step back. Why should we care? Why should we be interested in this? Well, essentially, chronic stress has an impact on our brain and our bodies and our mental health. So, breaking that apart, what are some of the impacts of that? Well, one, when we become stressed, so think about this fight, flight, and some of us freeze. It's a survival mechanism for us. Our bodies are amazing. And when we fight, flight, or freeze, we go through a whole number of changes in terms of releasing hormones. Our eyes dilate, we start breathing faster, we release glucose into our system to power our body to run from the perceived danger that we have. It really is amazing. Our brain also makes changes too. We shut down our frontal lobe and our hippocampus, where we store memories and also have self-compassion. And we really are in this fear center of our brain, our amygdala. This part of our brain is kind of like the guard watching out for us. But when we are in this constant stress state, which many of us tend to live in, we can actually, the release of cortisol can have long-term impacts, like shrinking our hippocampus. Again, remembering that part of our brain that's impacted by, that helps us with memory and learning. Also, and we see this in children that were raised in households that maybe had trauma or insecure, many of different things that can happen, that children grow up and they actually have larger amygdalas, tend to live in that fear response more. And then again, thinking about our prefrontal cortex, not be impacted by not being able to make decisions, complex decisions, or just feeling very indecisive. I don't know if you've ever felt like that, like I just can't make a decision, or known somebody. And then in our body, I talked about having this increased level of cortisol. Again, cortisol is great for us. When our bodies are regulated, we will have our cortisol be highest in the morning, and then it decreases throughout the day. That's fantastic. We're alert, awake, kind of ready to go after the day. It comes down, and then at nighttime, we're ready to go to sleep. However, if you have this increased cortisol, it's difficult to go to sleep at night. Also, when we have increased cortisol, remember I said our body releases energy in the form of glucose to get to our muscles. So we see this imbalance in terms of blood sugar. And then this can contribute to inflammation, decreased immunity. It disrupts our sleep, our digestion, and our overall energy levels. And then behavior. So we tend to have avoidant behavior, procrastinate, become irritable and agitated. Everything is like nails on a chalkboard. I just can't really take anything. I have no emotional resilience. And then what happens is we can tend to lean on unhealthy coping mechanisms. So whether that is avoidance, maybe fighting, irritability with everybody, drinking too much, shopping too much, eating too much, these things that give us quick hits of dopamine. So we have this transient feeling good and relief, but really it ends up being worse in the long run. So let's just look at the cycle of avoidance, essentially this anxiety trap that many of us can get into. And I think once we understand this, we can then recognize it within ourselves and then have the ability to change that, which is so important. So again, everybody here, I'm sure you all know what anxiety is. You are very familiar with it. And when we have anxiety, what are your behaviors? Thinking about what you do. So thoughts that we can have. We can fixate on the worst possible outcome of what's going to happen, or we just don't want to do it, or we're annoyed. Okay, we can have physical symptoms when we are avoiding something. So depending on what that is that we're avoiding, if there's a lot of fear behind it, we can have physical manifestation like headaches, actually shaking, tension in our body, change in our breath, or just feeling like I don't really want to do this, dread, restlessness, irritable, agitated. We're very familiar with anxiety. So what do some of us do? Avoid. Avoid is the tactic. So if I don't face this, then I don't have to feel or think about it or have any of this reaction. So we engage in that avoidance behavior. So this could be not going on a vacation because you're afraid of flying. or being really anxious in social situations. So utilizing maybe alcohol to help in that situation, those maladaptive coping skills I was talking about. Or if we just have this task, we'll procrastinate it. So instead of doing maybe going through your emails, we surf the internet. There's a million different things that we can do to procrastinate. So that feels good. Immediately, that feels good, right? You take that drink, you feel better in the social situation. I'm not going to get on the plane. Oh, that feels so much better now. I don't want to do this task. I'm going to scroll on Instagram. And we feel better. That is very true. What happens when we do this repeatedly? Our brains are like plastic, essentially. It's called neuroplasticity, meaning that behaviors that we do repeatedly, we lay down these tracks. So think about when you were learning to brush your teeth. Your parents told you to brush your teeth over and over and over and over again, and you had to do it over and over and over again twice a day. And you know, it was always this argument. Did you brush your teeth? Yeah, I brushed my teeth. Let me smell your breath. No, you didn't brush your teeth. Right? Constant reminder. But after a while, and now today, I hope everybody in this room, the first thing that they do when they wake up is brush their teeth without even thinking about it and going to bed. That's neuroplasticity. Essentially, we lay down those tracks. So if we're a person that tends to be anxious and then procrastinates or avoids, and we do that over and over again, this just becomes second nature essentially to us. Okay, well, that's good until it's not good, because then what happens? Well, we still have to respond to those emails. Or if we continue drinking more to socialize, that's going to turn into an issue. Or we never get to go on that vacation we want to go on because we don't get on a plane. So we get this intensification of whatever we're avoiding. And then what ends up happening is that we can have negative outcomes, right? So we could potentially lose our job. We could develop a substance use disorder. This happens quite frequently. I hear this story when I work with people in recovery. That was the only way that they could interact with other people, was to use a substance. You give up on ever taking that vacation. So we can see how we can get in this trap. It feels good immediately, but long term, it's not great. And I'm sure all of you have your own examples. So let's take a tool from CBT to apply that. And the idea for this month together is that you're going to be able to practice this together, or practice this week. And we're going to have some more tools next week that will build on it. And then by the end of the month, going back to that assessment that you did last week in terms of thinking, okay, how can I help address issues that I have going in my life in terms of my mood, how I'm feeling, using core CBT skills. So some of you may be familiar with CBT, but if you're not, CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. That's what it stands for. And essentially, our thoughts end up dictating how we feel and our behaviors. And we can change that. If we change our thoughts, we can change how we feel, we can change how we act, and then we don't get in this negative cycle and have better outcomes. So we'll just give an example, and I'm using a work example since this is on the backdrop of the workplace. But here's an example. Emma has been feeling frustrated because her coworker Jake frequently interrupts her during team meetings. She wants to address it, but avoids the conversation because she worries about confrontation. Many of you in here may identify this, and this could be a coworker, or this could be a friend, this could be a family member. Something somebody does makes us sad, mad, angry, insert your emotion there. And what do? We avoid that because we don't want to confront that person. However, that behavior doesn't stop. We continue to be faced with that, and then that makes us feel X emotion, and we behave in a certain way. So for her, she just stews in silence and feels angry and resentment, and this is a big stress for her. And think about this amount of time we spend at work if we're not addressing something at work, that again, that's not, we just don't go to work, once in our lifetime. It's 40 hours, 50 hours a week. So that can really impact our mood. Okay, so we see the stressor for her when we're thinking about this cycle of avoidance that we went through. And then she has this automatic thought. So here, I just want you to put this in your back pocket because we're going to be addressing that. And that's something that we're going to work on together. These automatic thoughts that we have. This is like, oh, I can't do that, whatever that looks like. So she thinks if I bring this up, he'll get defensive and it'll make things worse. A lot of times our automatic thoughts are not true. I call it our stinking thinking. Our brains, again, when they become stressed, remember our frontal lobe that makes good decisions, that's what goes offline. And so we have these thoughts that can be ego dystonic or not actually true. So Emma avoids that behavior, gets that short-term relief. However, Jake isn't going away. There's constant interruption. She's frustrated. This is her work environment where she spends at least 40 hours a day. It's impacting her mental health. Okay, so this is where we're going to start practicing, and you have a worksheet to do this. We're going to work on reframing that thought, creating a new thought, which then creates a different behavior. So again, this idea, our thoughts end up influencing how we behave. So here's one tool that I want you to, for you to start implementing in your life. It's called Dear Man. So essentially what you do is work through an issue you have with Dear Man. And you can do this in so many different ways, but we'll use this example with Emma. So first, just describe it. Hey, Jake, I noticed that when I start sharing ideas in meetings, I sometimes get interrupted before finishing my point. Expressing, how do you feel? I feel frustrated when this happens because I want to contribute fully. And then assert. I'd appreciate if we could be more mindful about letting each other finish before responding. Reinforce. I readily value your input, and I think if we're both able to fully share our ideas, and our team discussion would be even stronger. So she's using this tool, and the mind is being mindful. So she's focused on the goal, not getting distracted by being defensive. Confident, which can be very difficult, right? But we practice these things over and over again, and we lay down those new tracks. And then negotiating. There's always two sides to every story. How could she negotiate in a situation that maybe somebody says, oh, I didn't realize I was doing this, and then having a nice open conversation for that. So this is just one way to approach a difficult conversation in this a logarithm, essentially, which I really like when we think about having difficult conversations. So essentially, how does this, impact? Well, instead of avoiding, she faced it. She used a tool to have a difficult conversation, which set her up for success. And this is something that we can all do in difficult conversations, whether that's with family members, coworkers, anybody in our life. Gives us also an opportunity to step back. So I always recommend when you are in a high emotion situation, don't text, don't call, don't talk. Take a minute to just have a think. And this is a good way to organize yourself. So when you approach it, you don't regret maybe some of the things that you say or your actions. So Jake didn't even know what he was doing. And by having her talk to him about it, he realized that he agreed to be more mindful in the meetings. And then, of course, this is a better working situation. Okay, so this cycle of avoidance that we were talking about, common behaviors, we have procrastination. We talked about that already. Then what do? Well, we have all of these maladaptive coping skills, but essentially emotionally numbing. So that can be eating, social media scrolling, substances, you name it. We end up withdrawing from either our friends, our responsibilities, or we can feel like if I can't do it perfectly, then it's not worth doing at all. Perfection being the enemy of good, essentially. Okay, so I want you just to think, what avoidance behaviors do you struggle with? And most of us are pretty aware, but if not, think about that. And then in this worksheet that was sent out at the beginning of the month, you have some tools that we're going to review here for you to work on for this next week. And the first step is just to identify a recent stressor that you have. And this could be something that you typically always do. So you may avoid X task until you have to absolutely do it at the deadline. Anything here you would like to put, a hard conversation, whatever that looks like. So what is a stressful situation in the past week you avoided dealing with? And then now think about this cycle of avoidance and that automatic thought. So we're going to use a tool to deal with that automatic thought. So what was the first thought that came to your mind when you were avoiding a situation? And then, of course, what is our avoidance behavior? What did you do instead? So what are your typical avoidance behaviors? And there's a cost benefit analysis. Of course, there's some sort of relief, or we wouldn't do that. But what has been your long-term cost, or what is your current long-term cost of doing that? So just recognizing this, building some awareness around your behaviors. And then there's a handout on automatic thoughts, because I want you to focus on this week, the next week, as we continue to go on. And you have a worksheet to actually do this. Thinking about triggers that stress you out, make you anxious, sad, mad, whatever that emotion is. And then what is your typical automatic thought? So here's an example. I made a mistake at work. Our automatic thought, we typically go to worst case scenario. We catastrophize things, our stinking thinking. Our frontal lobe goes offline in a setting of stress. And so we go to, well, I'm probably going to be fired. I always mess up. I'm terrible. I'm just no good at this job. Put in your response. And then I want you to put in a new response there. So this is going to take some practice, because remember, our automatic thoughts, we've been thinking those for 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades, 5 decades, however many decades we may have been using these poor coping skills. Now, here we think, okay, what realistically does this mean? Sure, I may have made a mistake, but I don't know about you guys. This is my first time being human. I'm doing the best I can. We're not all perfect. We all make mistakes. There's a way to correct this mistake. Here are the things that I need to do. Insert a new thought when you sit down to challenge yourself. Okay, so now when we move on to step 4 in your worksheet, you're going to have an action plan. So what is one step you can take to face this situation instead of avoiding it? So having the conversation, setting a different deadline. One example of this is, which is really interesting. So we all have a circadian rhythm. And in general, our circadian rhythms are set on this 24-hour clock. So they've actually taken scientists and lived in caves with no sun for weeks at a time, and their circadian rhythm continues. It's disrupted by not seeing the sun, which is really important for us to get outside. However, it's only disrupted by about 2, maybe 3 hours. Our body continues to try and move in that circadian rhythm. And what they see is humans have different things happen in our body during our circadian rhythm. So for example, when we go to sleep at night, our body temperature goes down. And then in the morning, it increases. Our highest time of focus and attention is typically mid-morning. Think about 10 o'clock. So I always recommend, if you have a task that you're not wanting to do, or it's difficult or takes a lot of cognitive processing, do that task first thing in the morning. It also helps that we don't avoid it all day, creating more and more anxiety. but we know that we tackle hard tasks first thing in the morning. So thinking about this, what's one step you can take if you have a hard task you're not wanting to do, schedule that and block out that time where you do that. Another recommendation that I have is we get a lot of emails every day. And some of us more than others. I know some people who get hundreds of emails every day. If I got hundreds of emails every day, I'd probably just walk away from my computer and shut down. Like that would be really overwhelming. So then you think about, okay, let me just take this into blocks. So for, 1 hour or an hour and a half, I'm going to work on emails from 9 to 10, and then I'm going to do something different after that. My encouragement would be in the 10 minutes after that block, you go for a walk to reset and release dopamine, serotonin to make you feel better, go to a different task, and then you have another block. So thinking about this avoidance, how can you schedule that in to face that instead of avoid it? And then thinking about what positive changes could happen from that. I'm going to feel less stressed. And next week, we're going to talk about something called behavioral activation. So we'll dive into that a little bit more. So again, you're just picking one situation you typically avoid and going through the worksheet. And if you want to take the extra step, maybe this month you could just journal a little bit about how you're feeling as you're doing this. So we know from behavioral activation, again, that we're going to talk about more next week, but essentially being proactive, that improves our mood. So it may be just interesting to see how you feel. Okay, so today, what did we cover? Well, we talked about what happens in terms of long-term stress on our body or unmediated stress. We introduced CBT and a tool. So you have the worksheet, and then remember, you're going to tackle those automatic thoughts. And I would use that, you could use that throughout the week, throughout this month, going on to just notice what your automatic thoughts are and start challenging them. And then, so use your tools this week. Next week, we're going to build on that. We're going to talk about pillars of resilience. And you're always welcome to reach out to me if you need. I hope that this was really helpful. We still have a few minutes. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Oh, you're welcome, you guys. Thank you for coming. And if you signed up, you'll get reminders for joining next week and have the ability to do that like you did today. Swallow the frog. Absolutely. If you didn't receive the worksheet, a couple of people said that. Jenna, thank you so much, has also put them in the chat. So you can get that too if you didn't. And I will take some time to wait before I close this down so anybody can get them in the chat. Also, the handouts will be included in the follow-up email. People are asking about a recording, and I'm almost 100% sure there will be a recording sent out after this as well. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'll see you guys next week.